Deep into Ethiopia's northern hillside lies the market town of Waldia. After almost 5 long months of rebel occupation, the heart of the town is bustling once again. The market traders are back. Banks have reopened. The internet restored. People here say they have endured months of hell under the occupation of the Tigrayan rebel fighters known as the TPLF. The rebels have been ousted and government forces and local militia now patrol the streets. But the scars of the conflict remain. In every small neighborhood, I heard accounts of systematic sexual violence. From the start, mass rape has been used as a weapon by all sides, a war crime under the Geneva Convention. Early in the conflict, the victims were Tigrayan women. Ethiopian military and their allies, the Eritrean soldiers and Amhara militia, were the alleged perpetrators. This time, it's the Tigrayan fighters who are accused of raping Amhara women. There are countless victims, each story as devastating as the last. Salam, not her real name, was recently widowed. She was at home with her 3-year-old boy and a young girl from the neighborhood who she was caring for. One day, at around midnight, a group of rebel fighters ordered her to open the door.
ጻኑ ተኝቶ እንቅልፍ ይዞት ነበር ስንከፍት ነቃ በሩ ሲከፈት ነቃ እዛ መሳሪያውን ሲያቀባብል ተንጫረረ እናቴን አትግደላት እያለ ነው ሲጮህ የነበረው ከዛ አንቺ ወታደር ሚስት ነሽ በቃ አለ በቃ እንትን ፈታ ቀበቶ ፈታ ምን አለ ገፍትሬ ጣልኩት እንደውም አይዘጋም አሁን ቁም ሳጥኑን ሁሉ ገንጥሎት ነው ሄደው እዛ ወደቀ ተመልሶ በተነሳበት ሰዓት ወደ ልጁም ወደ እኔም ነው መሳሪያ ያቀባበለ ልጅሽንም አንቺንም ነው የምገልሻለሁ ልጄን ከምትገለው ብዬ ያው ራሴን ነው የሰዋሁት ምንም መቋቋም አልቻልኩም እዚህ ጋር ነቀኝ እኔን እዚች ጠባ መሬት ላይ ጣለኝ ልጄን እናቴን አትግደላት እያለ እየጮኸ ያው ከልጄ በፊት እንደዛ ተደረኩኝ
Despite the ordeal she endured, Salam urged me to go and find out what had happened to the young girl who had been staying with her. The child was the sister of one of Salam's neighbors who she had offered a spare bed to. Salam felt guilty that she was unable to protect her.
ልጅቱም ብዙ ሰዓት ተፈራርቀውባታል ልጅቱም ስትጮህ ትሰማለች እና ቆይተዋል ያው ትጮሃለች ድረሱልኝ ትላለች የእህቷን ስም እየጠራች ድረሱልኝ ትላለች ድረሽልኝ እህቴ ትላለች ግን በሰዓቱ ሪብቲ ብጮህ የሚወጣልሽ የለም እኔም ጮህ ያለው ለመጮህ ሪብያለሁ
After long months of closure, the local schools reopened, bringing much-needed normality for the children. But many will carry the trauma of the conflict back to the classroom. The young girl who was brutally raped while staying with Salam attended this school. We are calling her a Hitnesh. She is just 14 years old. She agrees to speak to us with her older sister and guardian by her side.
እጅም መሰደመቱኝ ቁጭ አለም ስል በጣም መቱኝ ቪዲዮ ላውን ነው እንጂ የተባው ለምጦች ነበር መቶኝ ነበር በርግጫ ራሴን ሁሉ መቶኝ ነበር ድምቶ ነበር ሚላይ ዞና ምን አስፈራሩኝ ከኋላዬ ከፍልጋችሁ በህይወት በቢላዋ ሰምብረውኛል በጁይ ከመሞታራ ማረጭልኝ ምን አጠኝ ተወርኩኝ ከዛ ከመደፈሩ ደግሞ ደፍሮ ሲያውቁ በጣም መቶኛል እርያልኩ ነበር ሁሉም ሰው ሰምቷል አይ ደግሞ ከፍቼ ወጣ ስል እንደብዬ ወጣ መቶ ደገመኝ ከዛ እንቅልፍ ጣለውና ተኛ ዘለልኩና ማርያም አንቺ አውጪኝ እያልኩኝ ዘርዬ እንዳለ ጨለማ ነው። ጫካ ላይ ነው ያደርኩት።
Some of the victims seek refuge and help here. The clinic Tesfai, which means hope, is run by Sister Tesfanesh. It's become a lifeline for many victims of rape, offering abortions, the morning after pill, and screening for sexually transmitted diseases. I told Sister Tesfanesh about Ehidnash's case, and she offered to help. Ehidnash is taken to the clinic to get tested.
ወንሸት አሁን የሚያምሽን ነገር ንገሪ። ምንድን ነው የሚሰማሽ?
እዚህ ጋር ቁስለት ምናምን ውጋት ይሰማኝ።
Ehidnash is tested and appears to be physically okay, but Sister Tesfanesh is clear that she urgently needs counseling, but that's not an option available for everyone. There still remains a deep stigma around rape.
የኢትዮጵያ ባህል የኢትዮጵያን ካልቸራችን ነው። ሁሉን ነገር እንድደብቅ ነው የምታደርገው። ሌላው ሰው ደግሞ እንደዛ ያረጋት ምናምን የሚባለውን ታሪክ ይፈራሉ። የሌሊት ኦኦታ ጧት ሲነጋ ይጠፋል። ያነ ምንድነው እናቶች ወይም እነዛ ልጃገረዶች ይሄ በነገታው ሌላ ሰው እንዲሰማባቸው ስለማይፈልጉ እና ምን ሰማው ነገር ሌሊት ምን ሰማው ሌላ ነው። ጧት ሲመጡ ወደዚህ የተወሰኑ ሰዎች ናቸው።
In the market square and bus station, life is slowly returning to normal. Thousands who fled the fighting are making their way back home. But for many of the victims, despite the evidence of war crimes under the Geneva Convention, seeking justice and accountability is almost impossible. Ehidnash is on a long road to recovery. A collective of charities that help rape victims have brought Ehidnash to the capital Addis Ababa for treatment and support. It's a new beginning and a chance to move away from the horrors that unfolded in her hometown, Waldiya.
Jamal Osman there with that exclusive report from Ethiopia. And if you've been affected by the details contained in his report, you can seek help by going to Channel 4 website, go to channel4.com/support. Well, joining us now in the studio is Donatella Rovera, Amnesty International senior investigator. For over 20 years, Donatella has been traveling the world investigating and documenting such crimes. Donatella, welcome to the studio. It is extraordinary to think that Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed, who won the Nobel Prize just in 2019, that his forces could be responsible for this, just as much as the Tigrayan forces are as well. How did it come to this?
Well, unfortunately, rape and sexual abuse of the worst kind has been very much a defining element of the conflict in northern Ethiopia. Last year, I spent many weeks speaking to women and girls who had been raped and subjected to all sorts of sexual torture, including being held as sexual slaves by government forces, members of the Ethiopian army, members of Ethiopian Amhara militias who were working with the Ethiopian army, and Eritrean soldiers who were working alongside the Ethiopian soldiers. And now in recent weeks, literally in the last few days also, I've been speaking to women and girls from the Amhara region in areas not far from Waldiya, who've been raped, gang raped, threatened with death by Tigrayan rebel forces.
So to be clear, what Jamal Osman has uncovered there is part of a much broader systematic picture.
Very much so. Up to July of last year, the Tigrayan forces were confined to Tigray, to the Tigray region, in a defensive position. And virtually all the violations, whether it was the rape or the mass murder, massacres, were committed by government forces. However, since last July, Tigrayan rebel forces have gone outside the borders of Tigray into Amhara and Afar regions. And there they have also been committing summary execution and gang rapes, rapes of women and girls. I've also spoken to girls as young as 14, to women who were raped in front of their children, to a girl who was raped in front of a mother by the Tigrayan forces.
Why have we heard so little about this? Why are the international institutions not there?
Well, we cannot be there because the government of Ethiopia has not allowed, not just Amnesty International, but no international human rights organizations have been allowed to go and investigate on the ground. And the media have been terribly restricted. And of course, both sides have been imposing blackouts, so cutting all communications. So speaking to people remotely, to the victims and the survivors and to the doctors, has been incredibly difficult.
And what hope of justice is there for these poor women and girls?
Well, the parties, both the Ethiopian government and the TPLF, the Tigrayan People Liberation Front, have shown disregard and contempt. They have not investigated. They have basically granted impunity to their forces. There are, of course, efforts at the international level. There is a panel of experts that has been created by the UN Human Rights Council, but probably it will not be allowed on the ground to investigate either. So at the moment, it's a very grim picture, and there is no pathway for justice for any of the victims right now.
And meanwhile, you know, in the absence of justice, you also have this terrible cloud of shame around these poor victims.
Yes, several of the women I've spoken to have told me that their husbands have left them since they were raped. And in one case, not just the husband and the family of the husband, but also her own family. So the humanitarian situation is desperate for everyone.
So they're victims and they're outcasts in some cases.
Yes, very much so. I mean, most of the victims are not even sharing what has happened to them with their own families, let alone coming forward and speaking. I mean, in the same way as you have done, we are anonymizing all the testimonies because it's impossible to expose them. The other issue is that the conflict has left medical facilities in tatters. And so the availability of physical medical care, but also psychosocial support is extremely limited for the survivors.